Hello, my name is Ray. Today, I would like to share with you my work on the term project for the classical materials and modeling class. Um, my term project is about solvation energy calculation of noble gas solutes in argon solvent using a method called the Wyndham test particle insertion method. Before I start, I would like to briefly discuss about this method. So the Wyndham test particle insertion method is a method used to calculate the free energy of solute in solvent. It is an important method because it helps us understand the solvation thermodynamics and phase equilibria in various problems. And in order to use this method, we leverage the principle of ensemble averages in statistical mechanics. I will talk a little bit on this later on. And this method has an advantage of enabling free energy calculation without using the partition function, which is typically used to evaluate the free energy of a system. And so by using this method, we can get around the issue of calculating our partition function and directly get the free energy of solvation. So this slide summarizes the statistical mechanics formulation. Due to the time limit, I am not able to go into detail about the derivation of this equation. However, let's just look at the result. So on the left-hand side, we have the excess chemical potential. On the right-hand side, we have minus KBT ln and ensemble average of e to the minus beta delta U. So here, delta U is the change of the internal energy before and after the insertion. And we can use this formula to calculate the excess chemical potential. Now, one thing to note here is that since we're talking about the ensemble average, the ensemble refers to the fact that we need to perform multiple attempts to insert the test particle into the system. And we do the same thing again and again, and then we take the average of those results. So that's how we get the excess chemical potential. And since we're dealing with single particle insertion, the change in the particle number of particles before and after the insertion is 1. And so if you use the mu equals to partial f partial n equation, and if delta n is 1, we get delta f equals mu excess, which is essentially given by minus KBT ln ensemble average of e to the minus beta delta U. So in this way, we can calculate the solvation energy of solute in a solvent. The Wyndham test particle insertion method has multiple applications. So here I'm just listing 4 of them. For example, it can be used for drug design, it can be used for environmental chemistry, in material science, and in biochemistry. In this work, I'm adopting this calculation procedure in order to calculate the free energy of the solvent, the solute, which are the noble gas atoms, in an argon solvent. So the first step to calculate the free energy is to perform the NPT Monte Carlo simulation to first equilibrate the system of n particles. And once we're able to equilibrate the system, we can then perform multiple attempts to randomly insert one test particle into the system. And in this work, I'm performing 1,000 attempts. And the next step is to compute the change in the internal energy before and after insertion, the delta U. And once we have the delta U, we can then take the ensemble average and use the final equation to calculate the free energy of solvation. So that's the procedure I adopted to calculate the free energy of absorption, of solvation in this work. And in terms of the system of interest, we're interested for the solvent, or we're interested in argon liquids. And so here I'm showing the argon phase diagram. And in this work, I designed 2 simulation conditions. We call them experiment number 1 and experiment number 2. And as you can see in the phase diagram, for both experiment conditions, they lie within the liquid region of this phase diagram. So that means we're simulating liquid phase argon. For the experiment number 1, I chose the temperature as 90 Kelvin, the pressure as 5 bar. Whereas for experiment number 2, I chose the temperature as 100 Kelvin and the pressure is 10 bar. So here I'm summarizing the experimental setup. So the first step is system definition. As I talked about earlier, for the simulation conditions, we separate them into 2 experiments with different temperature and pressure. And we also need to initialize the simulation box. So here I'm using a box with 50 atoms and Bose length of 5 angstroms. And to initialize the simulation box, I put argon atoms randomly inside the box. In terms of the solute, we are concerned with 3 different types of solutes, the Ne, Kr, and Xe. Their relative Lennard-Jones parameters are shown in the parentheses. We perform MPT Monte Carlo simulation for 10,000 cycles to equilibrate the system. And then we perform the Windom test particle insertion to calculate the free energy of solute. In terms of the interaction parameter, we use the Lorentz-Berthelot mixing rule. So we use this rule because for different types of atoms, when the interaction is different from if we only have one type of atom. And so we can use this type of mixing rule to calculate the interaction parameters between different types of atoms. And the results are listed here. So in terms of the preliminary results, I was only able to finish the first experiment. Here, the temperature is 90 K and pressure is 5 bar. And we first equilibrate the system for 10,000 cycles. So here in these 3 plots, I'm showing the energy, the pressure, as well as the box side length during the equilibration run. As you can see that for all 3 properties, they fluctuate around a mean value, which means that our system has been equilibrated. Next, we use we insert the test particle into a system, and we use the previous equation to calculate the solvation free energy of solute atoms. And the results are shown here. So if you compare the relative numbers, you can guess that in terms of the relative value, Ne has the highest solvation free energy, whereas Xe has the lowest. The other thing I did was I plotted the solvation free energy versus atomic radius, because intuitively, the noble gases are single atom molecules. And so, as you can imagine, like for different atomic radius, the interaction between the atoms also differ. So that's the motivation for making this plot. So from this plot, on the x-axis, we have the atomic radius in PM. On the y-axis, we have the solvation free energy in Zj. So as we can see, that there's this kind of inverse correlation between those 2 quantities. And so Ne has the smallest atomic radius, and it has relatively like higher solvation free energy. Whereas for Xe, the atomic radius is the largest among all 3, and it has the lowest solvation free energy. So this is a way to sort of get a sense of, you know, what are some factors that affect the solvation energy once we get the result. So that's my presentation. So for the final report, I plan to finish the second experiment and get the solvation free energy and compare with this result, so that we can get a more understanding of you know, the system, as well as get some conclusion out of the comparison and analysis. So that's